All right, I will now call the regular committee of the whole meeting for Tuesday, May 20th, 2025 to order. It is 6 p.m. And I will begin with the territorial acknowledgement. I'll acknowledge that we are located on the traditional territories of the Saanich people, and we pay our respects to their ancestors who've stewarded this land for thousands of years, and we set an intention to go forward with them in a good way together. I will now look for an approval of the agenda. I don't see any new items to add, so I will look for approval of the agenda that's before us. I see moved by Councillor Duck, seconded by Councillor Novak. All in favor? Carries unanimously. Agenda approved. We'll go on to public participation period. Now this would be where people who are not on the agenda would come forward to speak to council. I'm going to assume, since there are only 2 people in here, that they're probably speaking to the item on the agenda. I will call a second time to see if anybody comes in, and a third time I will call public participation period to a close. I will look for approval of the minutes of the regular committee of the whole meeting from May 5th. First, I suppose I'll look for any corrections first. Are these moving, or are these calling for corrections?
So moved.
So moved. Okay, moved and seconded by Councillor Novak. All in favor? Carries unanimous. The minutes are approved. We have no presentations. We have 1 development application. So item 7A, we have Development Variance Permit Application number DB 100374 for 9990 4th Street. And that's to increase the maximum fence height from 1.8 meters to 2.15 meters along a rear lot line. And we have a presentation from the applicant, Judy Peterson. So Judy, if Judy is here, can come forward to the microphone at the podium.
Okay.
And there's a little button at the bottom. When you press it, will turn red.
Okay. So we're just going to give you an overall of what we're planning. We're members of the Strata 5272 submitted this application. My husband Lyndon will answer any complicated construction questions. But our current fence is deteriorated to the point that we've got posts hanging up at several, just holding it up. And most of the posts and lower boards are rotten. And the fence was set into the soil, and it was built before the apartment behind us was built. And the apartment level property is about 6, sometimes 8 inches higher than our backyard. So the fence has got dirt and rocks leaning up against it. And so it's caused a lot of, it's old. It's also old, but it's contributed to the problems. So when we decided we needed a new fence, we decided that we would protect the new fence from the contact with the dirt and the rocks. And it was suggested that we could put cement piers in, which are, didn't ever even heard it before, but like a sono tube with cement in it and a bracket with the fence on it. And that takes the post away from all the dirt, which was more expensive, but we thought we have to do it because it'll just be a problem soon. So, and then we plan on putting treated boards along the bottom. And so, long story short, is that the piers will raise the fence. We thought 3 or 4 inches. So we applied for a variance, and all of this is happening. So we said up to 7 feet, and basically that was to allow for the 3 or 4 inches of the pier. And also our fence is higher on the east side, or our property is higher on the east side, and it steps down a bit. So we wanted to give the contractor some flexibility to make even panels and have the fence come down at a, so that it would look nice and not be quite a bit higher on one end. And we chose the fence design to match, if it ever gets developed, the apartment building where the boat was. That's also on our side, that's the side of our property. And then the back is where where we're building the new fence. So this fence will match, we believe, what he's planning for the side property if it ever gets approved and built next year. Okay. So that was it. So it's up to 7 feet. We're not planning on starting at 7 feet. We're going to see where it ends up. But we wanted to be within the rules. So if you have any questions?
Yeah, thank you. So I'll look to committee to see if there's any questions for the applicant. Okay. Councillor Garnett, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ms. Peterson, and Mr. Peterson for being here. So looking at the pictures, these are the panels that you're proposing to put in that you've attached to the agenda here. And those are standard 6 foot high by 8 foot wide, probably, or thereabouts.
If you could step, I'm sorry, if you could step to the microphone so that, well, yeah, the answer will be on the video.
The contractor will be making custom panels, so he'll make the height according to what looks good coming from the high corner across.
Sure.
So
Okay, I just have one other question for you, and that, having been to the site and seeing the fence, and yeah, I can see why you're a little bit worried. It's got quite a bit of lean to it in parts. And noting that closer to the eastern side, there seems to be something at some point in time that was added on top of the fence that actually probably makes it, I would say, in non-compliance right now. But so the intent is just to put these in and not to add anything in the future to make it even higher than what the variance is being requested?
No,
No, it wouldn't be.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Any further questions? All right, seeing none, I'll look for mover for the motion.
Oh.
There's recommendation there.
Point of order.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Do we need to reach out to staff for any comments?
Do the staff wish to read the report?
Thank you. Good evening. As was written in the staff report, this is a variance request to relax this one section of the zoning bylaw to allow the fence height to increase slightly above the maximum of 1.8 meters. It's on the south lot line, which is the rear lot line of this property. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll look then to committee for Mr. Garnett. Councillor Garnett, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to staff. Just one question. It's not really specific to the request, but more to do with the recommendation and the fact that it's a mail out. And of course, with my past history, wondering if we've had communication with the applicant in terms of the fact that if there is a strike on Friday, I'm not sure about how expeditiously they want to get the job done, but there could be a problem created with not being able to get the mail out, and if they want to reach out and have some other kind of avenue, if there's a process they want to get done quicker.
Sure, thank you. Yes, through the chair. I did speak with the applicant this afternoon and just explained what the town did during the last Canada Post strike in the fall, in November, December, that if they want to keep the variance moving forward, if council goes with a resolution for us to conduct the radius mail out, then they would have the option of getting the town to send those notices out by courier, which is what was done for a couple applications in the fall. So there is that option to keep it moving forward. They could also build the fence in compliance right now and then add the extra height later if they chose to put the variance on hold.
Okay,
So there's a few different options.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Any
Can I
further?
ask a question?
Oh, a question through to staff? Yeah, please approach the microphone. That isn't normally.
How long does it take, let's say the mail strike ends, or we do the courier route if it isn't too expensive? How long does that take? How long do you have to give people?
Yeah,
Like
go
if
ahead,
you mail it out
Councillor
on a
Higgin.
Monday, do you give them 3 weeks or 1 week or?
Sure. Again, through the chair, Committee of the Whole's recommendation from tonight will come to council on Monday, May 26th. If it is to send out the radius mail out, our typical timeline is to get those notices out by the Thursday of that week, and then it would go back to the following council 2 weeks later, which in our case, I think it is it June 9th, Mr. Edwards? I think it is, for the next council meeting. Then that would be when council would make a final decision 2 weeks later. And that's the same timeline whether or not Canada Post goes on strike. A courier company could
Yeah,
deliver the
okay.
notices in time.
Okay. So, you know, we sort of want to get everything done by the summer, and lots of us are having new pavers and stuff done in our backyard. So our plan, I believe, would be, we could get the contractor to take the old fence down, do the cement, and, you know, it's gonna take weeks anyway, and then, without putting up the exact height, we would just have maybe the posts and wait until we get an approval to where it could be.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Just to touch on a little further on process, as staff have indicated, we'll look to make a motion this evening. That motion will go to our council meeting next Monday night, If the motion is to send notice, then that process would occur. You've heard that it could come back to the council meeting 2 weeks, or on June the 9th. And then council is considering the responses that we get, any responses that we get from
Okay.
neighboring residents in terms of making our final decision.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks. Councillor Duck,
I'm prepared to move the recommendation.
okay, go ahead.
That owners and tenants in occupation of the property within 75 meters, 246 feet of 9990 4th Street be notified regarding development variance application number DV 100374 to increase the maximum fence height to 2.15 meters, and that any written correspondence received before the council at the time of consideration of approval of the variance.
Second.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Novak. Is there any further discussion? No? Would the mover like to motivate? Nothing further to add? Seconder? No? All right, I'll call the question then. All in favor? That carries unanimous. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll move on to staff reports. We have one item under 8A. This is the 2024 year-end budget variance report. And we will have Ms. Chen give us the report, the year-end financial results. Go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. Good evening, everyone. The purpose of this report is to provide information about the 2024 financial results as compared to our approved budget for the year. We'll start with a few notes on the report layout itself, followed by some highlights of the content. So in terms of the layout, the operating section has fewer notes than is typically included in the mid-year and third quarter reports, as many of the variances related to timing differences will have resolved by year end. In the capital section, projects have been grouped into categories that are more meaningful and relevant to demonstrate their year-end status. And we should also just reiterate that this year-end financial results report is prepared on a different basis and for different purposes than the financial statements which were presented to council last week. Financial statements apply standards that are meant to make them comparable nationally and internationally, and primarily prepared to satisfy external and statutory reporting obligations, whereas the report that we're presenting tonight focus on financial results relative to our budget and therefore more useful for internal purposes. In terms of the results themselves, on the operating side, general operating realized a deficit of $313,631, which was $136,369 less than the budgeted use of prior year surplus, which was $450,000 to balance the budget. Two areas, parks and storm drain, were the two areas that saw higher than anticipated expenses for reasons that were discussed in the report. And building permits on the revenue side was lower than budgeted as well. Water operating realized a very small surplus of just over $9,000, which was better than what we planned for in the budget. Sewer operating realized a deficit of $229,556, which was in line with budgeted expectations. Regarding accumulated surplus, which we've had a previous report on as well as discussed during the recent budget process, our accumulated surplus in the general fund has fallen below the current policy minimum levels. An updated report on surplus policy will be brought forward to council by the end of 2026, which will include recommendations for a plan for gradual replenishment. Accumulated surplus for water is well within policy levels, and some of that surplus was used in the 2025 budget to minimize the rate increase for this year. I should also note that there is a typo on the water surplus table on page 5 of the report. The bottom line item highlighted in purple said shortfall, but it is in fact an excess. So we have more in accumulated surplus in water than what is required by the policy minimum. Surplus for sewer is also below the policy minimum, and we are still anticipating a rate review to start later this year, one of the goals of that rate review will be to gradually replenish the surplus for sewer. On the capital side, most projects, so 72 projects out of 102 projects, saw some activities that incurred direct costs during 2024. Many other projects were in the planning and design phase, requiring staff time and attention, but no direct costs were incurred. Some of these projects have seen major progress in 2025 already, including one or two that are substantially complete or nearly complete already this year. Some other projects that are included in the capital budget are there to ensure funding is available if the right opportunity or the needs arise. So it is not unusual to have no costs incurred for those projects in any particular given year. And with that, we're happy to address any questions.
All right, we'll look to committee first for any questions to staff. Okay, Councillor Novak.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ms. Chen and Mr. Hissick for your report. As I've mentioned in previous meetings, I'm concerned about the surplus or shortfall, as it turns out to be. I know that we're planning to take steps to rectify this, but just for my own information, I'm assuming that this sort of surplus shortfall cycle does repeat over time. And I'm curious as to how often the town has ended up with a shortfall of $2.7 million, or a shortfall of surplus. It's kind of a funny way of describing it, but I understand what it's all about, but this is a fairly big shortfall. So I'm curious as to how often we get there and how much it's going to take to bring it back to the policy level.
Through the chair to Councillor Novak, I know the terminology can be a little contradictory, but let's be clear, this is not a deficit in any way. We very much have a fairly substantial operating surplus from prior year's operations. What we're talking about here is a deficiency with respect to the somewhat arbitrary policy we set for ourselves about 25 years ago. I can't tell you how deficient we might have been over all 25 of those years, but in my time here, we have always been above well, I shouldn't even say that. I think certainly for the last 10 years, until we fell beneath 2 years ago, we were above policy levels. And it's important to note that what we've been looking at the last few years with respect to pandemic impacts is unprecedented, and that is the largest reason why we've gone below our threshold as a way to help us weather the storm. How long it'll take to replenish, that will be covered in the upcoming staff report that'll come forward next year, and it'll be a council decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm done.
All right, Councillor Garnett, I had you next.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Thanks, Ms. Chen, for the report, and Mr. Hissick as well. I have three questions. So the first one is around the waste collection for public bins, and noting that they're over budget by close to 17,000, and having firsthand visual and anecdotally heard from other people, there has been in the past a tendency for some residents to actually put their garbage in our public bins in like full-on garbage bags. Is that typically something we're experiencing that's contributing to the cost, as well as, I know, extra events that are in the community? And if it is there a way that we can, what is there we can do about it?
That's a tough one, Councillor. We're never going to put a bylaw officer on every corner. So in terms of what can we do about it, we can ask people to comply, but enforcement is impossible.
Yeah.
So we just hope for good behavior all around. But as you say, it is very much related to events, and that's a good thing. So it's a bit of that and a bit of unnecessary dumping.
Thank you, which is kind of what I figured. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, just one thing occurred to me I'll add is I know I've heard or seen speaking with staff about, for example, abandoned material that from time to time is left on the boulevard. Very much like in that case, it's very difficult to trace the source of where it ultimately comes from unless, as Mr. Hisig says, you have someone there watching. So I think that is difficult.
Thank you. Yeah, I just think I just wanted to bring it up just as important for that the public knows that's something that does occur and is an added expense that we have to incur. My next question is with regards to the general operating fund and the mention of the budget use for surplus for 2025, the 831,500, and I believe 331,500 of that is attributable to the police dispatch costs that are being downloaded. And I'm wondering if has there been any update, or are we likely to have to use our surplus to cover that?
Unfortunately, there was no reprieve on costs, so we will be using surplus this year to offset.
Okay, thank you. And my final question, thank you, Chair. You had mentioned in the report also that a revised surplus policy would be brought forward for consideration by the end of 2026. And are we targeting Q3? And the only reason I bring that up is it's similar to the MOU for the rapid transit bus stop. My preference would be that it would be something that would come back to this council to make a decision on, rather than having something with a potential first council of people who've never sat here before having to make a decision with no background information whatsoever.
Thank you, Councillor. That it does make sense to bring it back to this council for initial consideration, but it won't really be put into effect until the following budget is considered by the subsequent council. And well, we can perhaps lay it out to the existing council, but I suspect we'd have to follow up prior to initial consideration of budget by the newcomers.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I do think it's important that we as a body have kind of the initial grasp of it, and then I think that would provide some good information for the incoming council before they make their final decision. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll look to any other committee members. Okay. I have one question. It's just regarding the projects. I mean, every year, and as the report states, there's always more projects that we kind of put on there than can be done. But I know that in 2020 we had so much stop that it felt like there was a few years where we were playing catch up trying to get projects done. Have we kind of reached a point where we're getting about the number of projects done that we think that we should, or are we still kind of dealing with backlog projects?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't believe there's any current backlog related to the pandemic. It's just there's just more work to be done. Our infrastructure is aging. We're becoming more and more aware of not just infrastructure projects that need to be addressed, but we're trying to respond to many council priorities such as the active transportation plan and various others that lead to additional capital projects for the improvement of the community. Things like purchasing parks, improving parks. It's all in response to multi-year plans that are in progress.
Okay, thank you. So the expansion of goals and probably the downloading of senior government kind of stuff as well. Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Oh, Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to staff. Thank you for the detailed report. It's very informative, and congratulations to staff and to all staff for the areas. There are numerous examples. I won't give examples, but there are numerous examples where projects have come under budget, and staff have indicated in places where it was over budget significantly what the reasons for that was. Often not in our control to some degree. My question is finding this information very informative, and it's a record, if you will, for council to consider and ask questions and that sort of thing, but we're not using it as an information source either in the 2025 budget that we approved several weeks ago, and it wouldn't be relevant necessarily to the budget deliberations that we'll have in the spring of 2026. So my question is while I understand that, you know, there are processes to wrapping up year-end financial statements, audit, and otherwise that lead to this very specific information, I would ask for staff consideration whether they wish to respond this evening or perhaps at council next week, whether it's practical, whether it's feasible that council receive what I will say is a version of this report. Much of this information to some level must be available during budget deliberations, because staff have put together for our budget deliberations what that capital budget is and what that operating budget is. So I would suggest a good portion of this information is available, but could staff perhaps comment on the potential for a version of this information coming to council during our budget deliberations?
Through the chair to Mayor McNeil Smith. The third quarter variance report typically comes forward in late November, which is fairly close to the beginning of our budget process. But the idea of trying to get this to a finished state in time to impact our budget process would be, I would say, impossible. The only option would be to delay our budget process. And frankly, I'm having a hard time seeing how this really impacts the decision-making going into the budget. So perhaps if there were some concrete examples, I'd be in a better position to comment.
Well, I think the way I'll try and give some examples, but through you, Chair, of the way this information is presented. And I did ask some questions of staff, as we often do prior to meetings. And you know, there were questions about the parks budget, about the $88,000 increase last year in 2024 over 23, about the $183,000 increase in the budget this year over last year, what the rationale for that was, and that sort of thing. And while much of that information had been provided to us at budget, it's provided in a different way, seeing the budget, if you will, in this format, in terms of the different operational areas, in terms of all the capital projects, and so that's an example for the parks budget. Another one is the vehicles budget. We appreciate that there are different budgets for parks vehicles, for fire vehicles, for I think the term is general vehicles or something to that effect. And there were budgets in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, and through the questions we asked, you know, what was the reason that those monies were unspent in 2024 or 2020 or 2023 and 2024, and the rationale was provided, but I didn't necessarily see that in the way the budget information is presented to ask those questions that I'm seeing with the way that the information is presented now. So, yeah, those are just the examples that personally I would find helpful in budget deliberations, seeing this information at some level. But thank you for the reply.
If there are no further questions, so there's no recommendation. This was just a report for information. So we don't require a motion. There's no other business. I will look for a movement to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Okay, moved, seconded by Councillor Novak. All in favor? And that's carried. We are adjourned. Thank you.